Hello everyone, welcome back to the DVD series. My name is Adam, and in today's episode we're going to be talking all about the process of making a DVD, manufacturing and duplicating for mass sale, and distributing it as well. We're going to be talking about how motion picture studios make money from the sales of DVDs versus what they make from streaming. We're also going to be talking about piracy and what it meant for the DVD format when it first came out, as well as what it means today in 2025 for the DVD format. Now, before I get to the four-stage process of making a DVD, I want to talk what actually is on this disc as a kind of, cursor to what we were saying in the picture episode, but a more in-depth, detailed talk about the MPEG-2 encode. Because on a DVD disc itself for a film is a VOB series of files, VOB. It's a container file containing the picture and the audio. Now, the audio can either be PCM, Dolby Digital, or DTS, but the picture is going to be MPEG-2. Now, for this film, which is a dual-layered disc, it has a audio commentary and a couple of tracks of audio other than that. So the film itself, even though it's an 8GB disc, is probably going to be about 5GB in size on this disc. But how does it get onto this disc from its source? Well, first off, it obviously, as we all know, comes from a 35mm source. That will be scanned at either 1, 2, or 4K. And then it will be created into an intermediate. Now, the intermediate can either be analog or digital. And back in the early days when DVD first launched, most movie studios were using the Laserdisc intermediates to create the DVDs with. These were analog on 2-inch reel-to-reel tapes, like a giant VHS, holding a master copy of the 35mm scanned film. And they were generally used first for the first 4 years of DVD. So if you've got an original release DVD, it's most likely from that same master that a Laserdisc would be made at. Now, there's nothing wrong with it, except that the fact that it was stemmed from an analog master. The other option was the digital master. Now, that's exactly what is used in today's world of making DVDs, a digital intermediate. Again, it can be 1, 2, or 4K in resolution, and it started around 1999 when they switched to digital intermediate, and that would have come from the scan of the 35mm, which we'll get into that process, but it would be 12 terabytes in size. So how do you get from 12 terabytes in size down to 5 gigabytes in size for the DVD? That's where the MPEG-2 encoder comes from. Now, if you look at the 35mm film, there's 24 frames that make up a single second of time. So for every 24 frames, 1 second is passing. And the difference between the frames will be just minor enough to show the movement of the action in the film. Now, the MPEG-2 encoder, which is a precursor from the MPEG-1 encoder, which was created by Sony, is a really good way of shrinking a file down in its size, but yet maintaining the quality of its original. So the basic way it works is it's all done software encoded, right? Back in the early days, though, it was a machine that was analog in nature, but it had digital parts on it. But the process of encoding for a DVD file would basically be running it through the software where it analyzes every single frame and decides to choose to insert what's called a keyframe. So if we take a look at a single frame of a 35mm picture, like this one, this was scanned from the original 35mm, which means, and it was scanned at 2K, which means it has a resolution of 2048 by 1556. Is the film, the entire film, would be 12 terabytes in size, and it has a pixel count of 3.3 million pixels in a single frame. So obviously way too big to put onto DVD. Now, the first thing that would be done to the film, and this happens during the scanning part, is that it would be cropped for the widescreen if it wasn't already matted out for widescreen during the filming process, and it would be turned like anamorphic again if it wasn't already during the filming for the presentation on DVD. So cropping and creating an anamorphic, to be honest, does reduce the file size already down to 8 terabytes and reduces the pixel count to 2.3 million pixels with a, once it's cropped, resolution of 1920 by 1080. Again, this is too high, way too high for DVD. So if we then took it down, shrinking it down to the DVD resolution, which is 720 by 480, this will reduce the file size to 2 to 4 terabytes in size and the pixel count to just under 400,000 pixels per frame. Again, this is like basically an uncompressed DVD. It hasn't actually had the compression, it's just had a cropping and then a shrinking of the resolution. The exact same elements though from that scan, which would have been done at 2K, or it could have been done at 1K or even 4K these days, are still going to be there, but they're just going to be on a smaller scale. Now, the resolution is very much tied to the way the encode works. You have 720 lines running across and 480 lines running from top to bottom. And if you place a graph of 720 by 480 over the 35mm picture, you'll see that there are squares, and each square would represent a single pixel. So what the MPEG-2 encoder does is it scans all the frames of the film and inserts keyframes. Now these keyframes will record the full frame of every pixel in that frame. So the very first frame of the movie will be a keyframe, and generally the keyframes get inserted every 2 or 3rd frame, but they can be inserted up as high as every 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, however high the author decides to go, to help reduce the file size. So let's say they did every 3rd frame. You'd have a keyframe every 3rd frame of the movie, and every keyframe has its full pixel count recorded, and we'll move on to the next stage. The software analyzes every frame in between the keyframes and analyzes every pixel in between the keyframes. Any pixel that does not change from frame to frame basically doesn't get carried forward into the recording. It just gets dropped, the information. And the original keyframe pixel gets basically photocopied along all the other frames. But as soon as a pixel changes in the resolution frame, it basically 1 bit will record that change, and that's a change of either color or luminosity, which is brightness. So basically only the changes between keyframes will get recorded, and every other frame will get dropped. This significantly reduces not only the file size, but the pixel count on each frame, because you might only have about 300 pixels that are actually being copied across or changing in a given single frame. Now, 1 bit changes 1 pixel, and the DVD format allows for up to basically 10,000 changes in a single second. And if you kind of think of, well, actually the top tier is 9,000 bits per second. That's what the authors are told. And if you think about that, 9,000 bits per second, that split over 24 frames. That means that you can have a total of 375 changes per frame within the pixels. Now, generally, films recorded in a standard DVD will have a bit rate of between 3.5 to 5.5, maybe 6,000 bits per second. and that's split over 24 frames. A super bit DVD will actually top out at 9,000 bits per second, utilizing the full bit rate of the DVD format. The basic way it goes is that the more bits that are recording the film, the more of the film is being kept, and the less artifacts of DVD that you'll see. The lower the bit rate, the less of the film is being recorded, and the more DVD artifacts are going to be known. So a higher bit rate does indicate a better quality DVD production. So super bit DVDs were genuinely super bit. Now that is basically how the MPEG-2 encoding system works. It's able to take a 12 terabyte file and shrink it down to a 5 gig file using the encoding software, and it is really good, and it has moved on to Blu-ray, and I'm not sure if 4K uses it or is compatible with it, but it might do. But it is a really good encoder. Now obviously Sony have further develop this technology using the MPEG-4 encoder, which is a much more improved version of MPEG-2, but MPEG-2 is really good. So that's a deeper explanation on the MPEG-2 encoder. Let's go through the process now of making a DVD. It's a 4-stage process, and each stage is super important. And it all starts with the 35mm negative, which needs to be transferred in the first stage to an intermediate of some kind, either analog or a digital. In the second stage, it's taking that intermediate file and creating what's called a glass master. Then in the third stage, it's taking that glass master to create and replicate all the other DVDs that will eventually become the final product DVD. And then the fourth stage is distributing it through the network to the retail store, where you can go pick it up and buy it and pop it in your DVD player. So let's go through each of these stages. The first stage, stage 1, is the scanning and transferring of the original 35mm print or negative to a intermediate state. Now, in the old days, it was done on an analog, reel-to-reel, 2-inch thick tape, like a giant VHS, able to hold up to, I believe, 2K of resolution, might even be 4K, with the audio on there. And that's how kind of like Laserdiscs were made. They were scanned initially at 1,000 lines per frame, and then it kind of early 90s moved on to 2,000 lines per frame. And then DVDs came along, and they sort of used those same analog masters for the first batch of DVDs, until they moved on to the digital intermediate. Same kind of process. The film gets scanned, each film, at either a 1, a 2, or a 4K lines of resolution per frame, and recorded to a transport stream, and that is the digital intermediate. 2K became the definitive way to do it by the late 90s, until 4K was being used by the end of 2010 or 2009. Let's take, actually, this DVD, Die Hard with a Vengeance, and follow a typical DVD's journey from the 35mm. So stage 1 is the scanning and transferring 2K to a digital intermediate file. So this would hold a 12 terabyte, on the computer representation of the full print. Then basically, let's see, Touchstone Pictures would have done this in their in-house scanning facilities, or offloaded it to somebody else. But then they'd ring up on the phone, hello, yeah, I've got Die Hard with a Vengeance here. It's just, done the theatre run, or it could be still in the theatre. And we want to make like 1 million DVDs. I've contacted 3 other printing or pressing plants worldwide, and I'd like your printing and pressing plant to produce 500,000 copies or 50,000 copies of this film. Is that something you can do? Oh yes, mate, no worries. We can have that ready in 3 weeks or whatever time scale. And so Touchstone Pictures would write a check out for however much money they would need to cover the cost of the creation of the final product. So for argument's sake, let's just say 50,000 copies that they ordered, and they would honestly be paying between anything from £2 to £5 per disc, you know. So doing the maths, I'll put it here, is what they would pay the printing company. And they say, yeah, we're going to send you a digital intermediate, which will basically be a hard drive, and they would mail it to them. And then the printing company would say, yep, we've got the hard drive and it's got all the extras. Obviously, they would have to be filmed, commentaries recorded. They would also be on the drive as well. Yep, we've got it all. Thank you very much. And we'll let you know when we're done. And that's basically stage 1 of how to create a DVD. Stage 2 is now turning it into the first stage of DVD creation. So, the printing pressing plant would have a clean room, and this clean room would have to be better than hospital clean rooms. It'd have to be like super clean. Everybody's wearing masks, and they would basically, there's a machine that they would have or hook up the drive to, where they can look at the footage, and they could watch it as many times as they want because it's digital. It's not going to wear out like an analog master would. Every time you play it, you're kind of wearing it away. So it's really, an analog master is really kind of played a minimum of times. And so in this next process I'm about to talk about, it would happen less to an analog master. But a digital intermediate, they can do whatever they want because it's all digital. It's not going to be affected by playback. And basically what they need to do is create what's called a glass master stamper. And this is basically slightly bigger than this in its original size, probably about the size of a laser disc. And it's basically a glass representation of the DVD you'll end up having. So it's all put through this machine where it's basically modulated through lasers, and they have these glass discs all ready to go. And it's a really laborious, about a 3-hour process to create one of these. They only need to create about 5 or 10 because one of these glass discs will probably go on to make about 25,000 DVDs. So 1 or 2 of these is all that's needed, and it takes about 2 to 3 hours to make a glass disc itself and then scribe the information on. And it's a real in-depth process on how these are made. I won't bore you with it, but it involves like really polishing and chemicals and all that to get a really perfectly clear, smooth surface, because if there's any imperfections at this stage, your whole thing is screwed moving forward. So these are like super duper clean and, you know, beautiful. They basically then put it on a platter, and I'll have some video here, where through lasers, and it's much like a CD, much like a laser disc, the laser etches onto the disc the information that's going to be, you know, encoded on the disc, and it's done through lands and pits, which are much smaller than CD or Laserdisc, but it's the same technology, and it's the same way Blu-rays and 4Ks are made, but they're just made with smaller pits and lands than a DVD disc. And so it's etched on around the entire disc on one side only. So if it is a dual-sided disc, then it needs to basically be done on a separate glass master. And if it's a dual layered disc, it's then done on both sides, but for a single layer it would be just done on the one side. Then they take the glass master and they stamp out the rest of everything else to create a glass disc this size, and the information you can actually see etched onto this disc. They then take that glass master and they put chemicals on it, and they start building up layers of nickel on the surface. Now we're only going to talk about the one side, but obviously dual layered, you know, it'd be two sides, they have to do it twice, and and then stamped onto the next phase. And if it's a double-sided, it has to be kind of the process done twice to be able to stamp it on both sides of the next phase. This is now stage 2 of taking the glass master and turning it into a DVD itself. So they take the glass master, and basically with all the nickel that's built up, and it takes about an hour and a half to build up a layer of this nickel, it then goes into several more machines where there is the plastic, and imagine if this is see-through, okay? But there are plastic carbonate versions now of the DVD just sitting in this machine, where the stamper now comes along and goes like that. It's really quick. It's done really quick. It's not like Daniel's Hutton like that, but it's stamped together, and the impression of the nickel is left on this, okay? And then basically it's rotated around and stamped the other side, and then that is the dual layer system now encased on this. So if you saw the DVD, it would look like this, where you could see the information on one side and the other side would basically be blank for the printing phase. And that's why I've used the black disc, so you can see that there is a matted side and a glossy side. So this has now got the stamped information on it. It then moves along the conveyor belt to where it meets another layer of plastic looking exactly like this. And the two, and it'll happen both sides if it's double-sided, but the two are then put together, and as before they are welded together, there is a layer of glue that is inserted in that will cover the entire disc, and then using an UV light, it is basically then sealed shut. That process, if done incorrectly, can lead to disc rot further down the line if the sealing isn't done properly, if they rush it basically, and if the glue doesn't spread evenly. So basically this finished DVD disc here, which is a blank one, but it's still the same process, is actually made up of 2 layers of plastic like this and a glue layer in between, which you're looking through. Now that is basically, it's also its protective layer embedded into the plastic. So if you happen to scratch this disc, the theory goes you're not touching the data, you're not damaging the data, and it can still be read. That's true up to a point, but then once you create enough scratches, or if they're deep enough into the actual plastic, it kind of then becomes unreadable. But that's how cleaning solutions work, is they fill in those scratched holes where it can now read the disc once again. So it now moves along the conveyor belt to where the printing stage will happen, and it basically goes in and it prints whatever is going to end up being printed on the disc, and it continues to move on. Now they're able to do, like, in terms of stamping, they're able to do something like 70 discs a minute, and for the printing they can do about 50 discs a minute, and the end result will look like this, where it comes out and it's got all the printing done on that side that's drying, and then the information and data is done on this side, and it's 2 pieces of plastic welded together with an edge that you can't actually pick apart, and then it will move on to the packaging stage where all the discs are put in their cases and sealed immediately at the other end, and then that is basically done on a massive scale. It can take up to 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a month, to print out 25,000 copies. The first couple of stages are super crucial, but then once the 3rd stage of replication, that actually happens. Doesn't have to be a clean room by that time, but it happens very quickly. And they can spit out as many as the motion picture studio will need, or has put on order. So now we're on to stage 4, the distribution. So at the other end, these are all coming out, and it's probably cost the printing house X amount of money to do this, which the movie studio has paid them probably about £2 to £4 per disc. You know, obviously probably in dollars because it's Hollywood. And they've charged you know, whatever for the full batch. So the movie studio is paid, the printing company, they've been paid, and then this now will all be packed up into massive pallets. You know, probably take about 2 or 3 trucks with about 10 pallets a truck full of boxes of these films on board. You know, let's say there's 100,000 of them. Okay, so now that they've arrived at the central distribution warehouse, the central distribution warehouse is actually now going to buy the film stock from the movie studio. So let's just say 100,000 films that the studio ordered from the printers, and they paid £300,000 or dollars for the films to be printed. They made them. In all honesty, it's probably only cost them 50p per film to make. Like, the printing of DVDs is very cheap when you compare it to VHS or even Laserdisc. There's less process line involved, and you know, plastic polycarbonate is very cheap to make. It can be as low as 20 or even 10p a disc, or like these things, like not even a penny a disc. Okay, but to create a film for the printers probably costs roughly 1 or 2 quid for film, but they're charging between 3 and 5 for the movie studios. So they are making money. So the movie studios paid like 300,000 for 100,000 copies of Die Hard with a Vengeance. They're all then boxed up into many different boxes, sent to the distribution warehouse, where the distribution warehouse now pays like $1 million or pounds to the movie studio to buy off the movie studios. So they've made their money back now, the movie studio has. That's it, they're done, they've washed their hands. The films are now a part of the distribution chain, and you know, out of 100,000 copies of Die Hard with a Vengeance, Touchstone Pictures would have made $1 million. Now obviously they made a lot more than 100,000 copies, probably closer, who knows. There is no actual estimate. Movie studios do not give their numbers away. There is no idea on how many copies were made, but at a guess, 10 million. You know, it's a very easy to find film. You know, more popular films had more copies pressed because they knew they would sell them. So they would honestly, if you think about how much 10 million would, you know, make, the movie studios make between they make between 300 to 700 million per film for DVD distribution. Like, sometimes going up to $1 billion. Okay, like for every single film that is a blockbuster hit, will net to the studio 300 to 700 million, you know, for all the copies made and sold. So now the central warehouse has bought them for $1 million. They obviously want to make their money back, so they divvy them up into smaller loads, probably between 10 to 50 copies per parcel, and they get sent to supermarkets, WH Smith, HMV, back in the day, like Best Buy, Woolworths, the supermarkets, the local ma and pa's shop that will sell DVDs, like anywhere that DVDs were sold. Libraries would get some, the rental blockbusters would get some. They would all be shipped off, and then it would be up to the, you know, the owner of companies like Asda or Walmart, who would ring up this central distribution company and say, yeah, I'd like to order 50 copies of Die Hard with a Vengeance, please, and I'd like you to send it here, here, and here. They would then charge the company, and in all honesty, for 100,000 copies where they've paid $1 million for, they would double their money. Okay, obviously this now increases the price per disc to the retailer who has bought them. The retailer is buying the films for between 7 to 10, maybe 12 pounds, depending if it's a special edition or something. But the 2-disc collector's edition probably would have cost the retailer 10 quid to buy from the, you know, per copy. And obviously more copies you buy, the cheaper that becomes. But probably a tenner. This actually sold for 25 or 24.99 when it was first released. So that means the retailer made £15, basically doubling their money. as well. Everybody's doubling their money. And so, yeah, they would then be distributed off to all the stores. The supermarket would get them in, put them in the cage in the back until the release day. They'd get them like days, maybe even a week before the release date. So on the release date, boom, it's sitting on the shelf. Thank you very much. I've just purchased this copy, and now it smells brand new. I can still smell that glue off-gassing in here. Put it in my player, and now I can watch Die Hard with a Vengeance. And it's probably taken a 3-month process, 3 to 5 months for this entire process from 35mm to my door. Unless they've scanned the film years ago. That can also happen where they've done the scanning and then archived their results for future use. That happens a lot. But that is basically the manufacturing and distribution of the DVD format. But how do the movie studios make money? Well, like I said, they sell the batch of copies that they've bought from the printers. They sell it to the distribution warehouse, who pay them to buy the whole lot off them. And that's how the movie studios make their money. Now, versus streaming, if they were to license this off to, say, Netflix, they would not want this to be a long-term deal. This film they'd probably license off from anything from $20,000 all the way up to $1 million, right? In fact, like streaming wise, I would say that there is no film that goes over 100 million for a license fee. Like, this would probably got licensed for $250,000, you know? The licensing, depending on the popularity of the film, the time that the film came out, can be anything from 10,000 all the way up to 100 million. I think famously, Friends, the TV show, was licensed to Netflix for 100 million. But you're talking like 236 episodes, which is, a little bit more than a feature film. So that probably would have been licensed for $250,000, but it would be for a specific time period. So Netflix would be going, we want it as long as we can, whereas Touchstone Pictures or Fox or Disney, who own Touchstone, will be actually saying, well, we want it, license it to you for the shortest amount of time, because when that license runs out, they can then try and license it again to them, and basically again, so the company who owns the film will always be trying for the shortest amount of time, whereas the Netflix, the Disney Plus, the Hulu, the Amazon, they'll always be trying to get the long, and it's basically how much worth of this film value does the streaming service give it versus like how long they're going to get it, and whatever price and time scale that both are happy with is the final contracted license. Like, that is it. It can be a back and forth game. It can be, where Netflix go to Touchstone Pictures, it says, or Synergy on here, and say, 200,000, mate. I'll give you 200,000 for a 5-year deal. And Touchstone Pictures say, you're having a laugh. This is John McClane. This is the third one. This is better than the sequel. It is better than any other one that came after it. So if you want it, it's going to be 500,000, and you can have it for 2 years only. And Netflix will go, 500 grand? Will that really net enough profit to make it worth our while? And they say, well, how about, Netflix will say, how about for 1 year? How much will you give it to us for a year? And, the Touchstone Pictures people, or Disney, because they own Touchstone, will probably say, yeah, 200 grand for 1 year, done. And that's it. Sign on the dotted line. Netflix now have acquired the rights to Die Hard with a Vengeance for 1 year at the price of $200,000, pounds, yen, whatever. And when that time is up, it disappears off the streaming service. And if Netflix deem it worthy enough, they will then go back to the company and say, can we have it again, please, for another time period? And another deal contract would be made. Now, DVD sales, a movie house can make anything up to like 700, even $1 billion worth of profit or sales, you know, from one single film. So if a studio, like on average, movie studios bring anything out from between 3 to 15 films a year, you know, like on mainstream Hollywood, you know, and then on the home format. That's every movie studio. So let's say if they brought out 8 films this year, you know, they're getting about $1 billion, almost like 700 million, you know, sales from just the DVD sales, you know. And then you got the Blu-ray sales, you got the 4K sales, you know. Maybe not as much. They're probably not, you know, which is why 4K, they're playing such silly buggers with that community. Oh, we're only going to make 2,000 copies, guys. And then it's limited edition. There's only 100 slipcovers. And then if you want it, it's never coming back. You know, and it's like they're really teasing with that community. Whereas DVD, they're like, yeah, give us like 200,000 copies of this, mate. You know, not a problem. Everybody's after this. 53% of the market share go after DVD. Only 23% of the market share go after 4K, and about 25-26 go after Blu-ray. DVD is where it's at, and the movie studios know it, and they print loads, and they make loads. And let's say they make 500 million at a low estimate. 500 million for one film, that's all the profit they'll see from this pressing of the film. If they want to make more money, they have to go and print more copies or re-release the film, generally within the 10-year IP window, and bring out like the super duper remastered version, you know, with extra features. They have to go through that whole process again to make another 500 million. But that 500 million is done for that film, whereas on streaming, a film like 200 grand for a year, and then you times that by 25 years. That's a little probably a bit more tempting because it's like money for old rope. But that is the difference between how a motion picture studio makes money off DVDs versus streaming. So now you can understand why films disappear suddenly off streaming, or why they never get them, or even why they're heavily edited. Like Touchstone Pictures could say, do you know what? We don't like any use of the N-word in this film. So we want Samuel Jackson to say, you know, bunny or something, you know. And Netflix will probably even say that, you know. Somebody might say that. And then this gets edited for the streaming service, which then isn't this version. And that makes this version much more desirable. Sometimes the movie studios purposely remove parts of a film because they want you to go buy the physical media copy, or to make it more attractive, you know, because they know the streaming is probably where most people are going to go because they're lazy buggers. I just prefer to sit on my chair and flick through Netflix rather than go to the store or on Amazon on my computer and buy a copy that I then have to open up, put into my player, push play, all that rigmarole. I can just push a few buttons and it's on Netflix. Movie studios know people like convenience over quality, but there are a small portion of people who like quality over convenience. And yeah, they play these groups of people off each other, you know. Let's edit the movie there, so they'll go buy it there. Let's make it limited there, so they'll have to go watch it there. Puppet mastery techniques by movie studios to get your dollar. That's all it is, right? So let's talk now about piracy, okay? How it affected the movie industry moving forward, to how it affects it today, 2025. Well, when DVDs first came out, there was obviously a series of copy protection systems in place to not be able to, you know, copy a DVD. So I couldn't burn a copy of this myself, because it being digital, I can make a perfect one-for-one copy of this. And so, you know, there was techniques put in the disc to stop that. Some of them got soon hacked, even before the release in Europe of DVD, even before the release in America of DVD. Like, there were people in the world buying the Japanese, you know, DVD launch and hacking it on day one, ready for when it then came out in here and there, so they could hack it day one. The piracy issue for DVD has been a more successful endeavor than drugs, terrorism, sometimes even funding terrorism, you know? The process of making a DVD from a blank DVD rewritable or recordable disc is cheaper than to make it from the actual warehouse of making a DVD, because half the work has already been done. You're just burning per copy, you know? There are spindles, you can buy spindles of blank DVDs where you can set up like 50 DVD drives, put your disc in the one, record across 50 others, and burn 50 copies in like 3 minutes. And then have that running like a mine 24 hours. You could soon burn off 1 million copies within a 24-hour window. That is so much more quicker than the actual legit way of making DVDs, and they sell, right, way cheaper. So if this cost me $24.99 in the shops, the Dodge Pirate version of this probably $5.99, maybe $9.99, you know. But like, I would not know the difference, because the artwork would be identical, you know. The only way you can tell the difference between a dodgy disc, a bootleg pirate disc, and the actual real disc. So this is Die Hard with a Vengeance, and that's its real disc. It's silver in color, you know, whereas a bootleg disc, which is a blank one, has a different coloration, sometimes even purple, but they're completely different colors. So you pick that up. That is the only one true way to tell. But sometimes you might find a DVD that actually is legit and looks like that. It is actually quite hard to tell the distinction between a bootleg and a real DVD. The pirates have gotten that good, you know, at printing covers and the labels. Like, other times they're not. You know, sometimes piracy is going to the cinema with a camera and filming it from there and then putting it to disc. It may not be just getting the legit copy and burning that. It could be literally a cam job. It could be the projectionist piece of shit filming it, hooking up the audio to the actual projector and filming it on a tripod, so you get perfect sound and you get a really good picture with nobody walking in between the shots, you know, or getting caught. Like, there are so many different ways to make a DVD pirate copy. You can even do it at the mastering stage on the mixing desk by just burning off to a USB stick the fine results. You know, there are so many copies of films that have come from the actual movie studios themselves, or people in the industry who make them and then make money from them, as well as, you know, pieces of shit who copy, you know, legit ones to mass produce them. In fact, I'm not going to show you any footage, by the way, of piracy, because I don't condone it. So I'm not going to go and download footage to put in this video of piracy. You all know what it looks like, but the only pirate copy thing that I have in my collection is this Masters of the Air Blu-ray that I didn't know was going to become a bootleg copy when I bought it. I honestly thought, because I've got the Pacific and Band of Brothers, and I haven't actually seen this yet, and I was like, I want to get Masters of the Air. Bought it off eBay, #1 spot for piracy. And I got it and I thought, yep, this is it. This is the legit one. This is it. Look at this. That's how good a bootleg can look. Absolutely 100% legit. Even got its own little barcode down there, you know. Then I saw what's on the side and I thought, oh shit, I've just bought the bloody Korean version or something. It's got Chinese writing there. I've bloody bought the, yeah, must have come from Korea, you know. It's got Chinese writing all over it. And then it opened up like that. I was like, yep, this honestly is legit. It's brilliant. Love it. Pulled the DVD out. It's a slipcover, actually, not a digipack. Even that looks great. The quality on the cover, the print there, is absolutely pitch perfect. TV, Apple TV Plus in the corner. I mean, that's where it first came on. But all the information down there, digital sound, Blu-ray, 5.1. Starting to think a bit weird. What's the NTSC 1? Okay. China isn't NTSC 1, by the way, on Blu-ray. It's actually doesn't even have 1 or anything. It should be an A or a B, you know, or a C. And then I looked inside, and things started to go, yeah, this doesn't actually look that legit. The colouring on the disc is way off from the colouring printed on here. As you can see, the techniques to do both are not exactly the best. And the actual picture itself, I would say, is okay. But the feel of it is not. It feels like a weird... And then we lift the disc out. Now, I'm going to show you what a legit Blu-ray looks like. If we take the old Lawnmower Man Blu-ray, which I have never opened, this is the first time. That's what a Blu-ray legitly looks like. If I can get it without mirroring what I'm looking at. That's what a Blu-ray looks like, legit. That's legit. You can see the camera, okay? That's legit. I better keep that at hand, because, oh shit. It don't matter if this gets scratched. This is what the Masters of the Air DVD Blu-ray looks like. What the fuck is that? Is that a PlayStation disc? I feel like they've sent me a PS2 disc. So, Lawnmower legit, Masters of the Air not legit. That is the difference right there between the two discs. Yeah, Masters of the Air is a bootleg pirate copy that I didn't realise when I bought it. I'm not going to throw it away. I have actually looked at the quality on this. It's been recorded off Apple TV, clearly. But at least I can watch it, and I'll keep it until the legit copy comes out, and then I'm going to bin it. Because I don't want this. Like, I feel bad for having it. But I will watch it. I will actually watch it one day. I've got no desire to watch a bootleg, so that's why I've still not seen this. And this has been out over a year, I think. So it's just sitting on the shelf, really. But that's basically piracy and what it does. Now, what it did to the industry of DVD is sweet FA. It didn't kill it. It didn't even damage it. Like, DVD piracy was so big, you could go to your local car boot and pick up like 3 for a tenner. Like, I remember going back in 2002, and there was Panic Room, there was Spider-Man, there was another film which I can't remember, and there were hundreds of copies of these films on this desk, and 3 for a tenner. There you go. Camcorder jobs from the cinema. It's such a massive industry. It makes more money than the movie studios do in total. Like, it's a $1 billion industry. That's why, like, this is back in like the 90s and the early 2000s. It's not a billion, you know, industry now, but it was back then, and it actually funded terrorism. It was a huge industry. That is why it became so big, is because you make so much money from it. You know, you get off Billy Bob, who's been to the cinema, you know, filmed the film, you know, and then you burn it to your DVD through whatever process, and then you sell it, and then you've got the bloody FBI knocking your door, to be honest, and shuts you down. Like, there's task force that were created to shut people down. You know, to find the big hitters, like off in Malaysia or Taiwan, where they'd be hiding, you know, in the Philippines, where they'd be mass producing in a store all of their stuff, and then they'd go and shut them down. And it's a dangerous business for those agents who were having to shut these people who were making millions, billions of money, and it's all going bye-bye, you know. Nowadays, I would say piracy is more of an online thing. You know, you got your Jolly Roger site, you got your sticks, your Amazon sticks, Yeah, yeah, it all comes from somewhere at the end of the day, and it all funds probably terrorism. If you've pirated back in the year 1999 to 2000, maybe even between 1993 to 2000, you could have been putting money towards 9/11. The terrorists who attacked, you could have been contributing towards that attack. And it's still that same fact today. Your money or your time and effort that you put into piracy, you could be funding someone's death, basically. Think about it. It's like literal blood money, you know. Even if you're not paying, like you're downloading for free, somebody has done that. And if nobody's downloading these things that are done pirated, then it's not worth anything to the person doing it, and they stop. But if everybody continues to download off the Jolly Roger site or get things for free without paying, you're contributing to the death of probably thousands of people. And that's my way of trying to guilt people to stop piracy. It's a waste of time to pirate. You don't get the best results. You don't get the best copies. You get subpar crap. And you get a person you've bought from who doesn't give a shit about you. You know, they don't care as long as you give them the money. Whereas Warner Brothers, you know, there's been loads of Warner Brothers films, this isn't one of them, that have basically got disc rot because the layers of the DVD are broke down with the glue and that, and they've just rotted away because they had a dodgy manufacturer. You know, a pressing plant, and it might not happen to all the pressing plants, it might just be one pressing plant. So check your discs, 2010 to 2020 or something like that it is, or 2007 to 2010, whatever it is. Check your discs. And Warner Brothers had a disc replacement service because they care about their customers. Pirates do not care about their customers. There's no return service. Mate, this is a pirate copy. Can I have my money back? Oh, yeah, sure. Here you go. No, get out of my shop now or buy more. You know? It's like they don't care. You have no customer service in piracy, okay? Whereas you do with legit movie studios. And if you show your support to a movie studio, they will give you more. And this is the main killer now. Piracy completely inhibits future quality and production of the motion picture industry. If every film got pirated, the studio, by the way, doesn't get paid for any of these pirate copies. There's no pirate sending checks off to 20th Century Fox. Mate, your film made me $1 billion. Here's your cut of it. You know, that's not happening. The motion picture studios like 20th Century Fox do not get any money for pirated copies. And if all films got pirated, the motion picture industry doesn't have the money to make more films. The way the industry is now is that the amount of money that's been lost to piracy has inhibited the cost of making good films, because now they want to make cheap films. They want everything to be cheap. I don't want anything less than 90 million, you know, or 100 million. It's like it's got to be cheap, because your average movie today is between 90 to 100 and 200 million, you know, on average. Like, maybe a little bit less. Maybe that was like 5 years ago. But now studios are trying to get it on the cheap. Yeah, let's hire Timmy because he'll do this job, that job, this job, that job. You know, movie stars aren't getting paid what they used to get paid. Back in the golden age of the 80s and 90s, they were throwing money out to production crews, to stars. People were getting paid legit. And then piracy comes along, and now people aren't getting paid legit. And the studios are trying to skimp ways to make, like, oh, we're going to make this new film, but we wanted a trilogy to guarantee success. And we're going to pay you this amount, this amount, this amount. But we'll give you residuals as well, you know. And that means nothing in the cinema today, because most people wait for streaming. Cinema isn't what it used to be. So they're happy to hand off, you know, oh, you can have the percentage of the cinema ticket run. You know, that's worthless now probably for a film, unless it's like the latest Avengers film. So people are getting paid less, and it really does hurt the industry. You know, the more that all the money from piracy needs to go back to the movie studios so we can have some decent films and people get paid. You know, instead of going, do you know what? We've just and I can't. I'll just use this film again. We've just put together this film. It's all been done. It's all been shot, but it's cost us like 150 mil, and the film's insured for 200 mil. I don't think Netflix are going to buy this for 150 mil. Let's just throw it in the bin and insurance write-off for 200 mil. We'll make 50 mil on it. You know, I don't think Netflix is going to buy that for 100 mil. So in the cinema, it ain't going to make that much money. Just insurance write-off it. That's what's happening in the movie industry, because it's better for the motion picture industry, because piracy has hurt them, but it hasn't killed them, and it hasn't killed DVD sales. DVD is still the number one best-selling format of all time, you know. But piracy today is more online. You know, somebody still is uploading, but there are way more people downloading without having to pay direct upfront cash. But one way you are paying is that you're inviting criminals into your PC to copy all your data, your bank details, your card details, and then they go start making purchases on your card, and that's how you're paying. Like, piracy leads to you losing control of your institution financially and stability. Like, oh, my money's gone in my bank, what the hell? Because you downloaded a pirate film off the Jolly Roger site, and because the film that you've downloaded has also probably an encrypted virus, has now copied all your details, and now, you know, Captain Jack McGee is buying dildos in your name. And that's basically how it works in today's world. That's how you pay. You think you're getting it free, but you're paying because your PC is now corrupted or copied or cloned or being mined, and it's like, that's how you pay. So just forget piracy, forget the Jolly Roger site, forget everything, do it legitly. The money goes to the studio, you know, and they can make better shit in the future. Makes sense to me. Anyway, that's basically, I think, the end of this video. It's gone on far too long. Okay, thank you so much for watching, and that wraps up not only this video but the entire DVD series. Now in the future I do plan to do a VCD series, a VHS series, a Blu-ray series, and a 4K series for the video side of it, as well as an SACD, a CD, a tape, and a vinyl series. But we're talking in the future. If you want to be able to collect all of these series that I'll be making, please subscribe. Your support is greatly appreciated. Join my members channel because you get to see it about a month early before the rest of YouTube does. Thank you so much for watching this series, and enjoy if you're still watching other episodes in the series with the links down in the description box below. I shall see you in my next one. Take care. Bye-bye. Fuck.